So this week is the Parsha of Shlach. And we all know the famous story of the spies. It's known as the sin of the spies. And today we will analyze some aspect of that story, which many are familiar with, but briefly, as the Jewish people are poised to enter Eretz Yisrael, they request from Moshe Rabbeinu to be allowed to go on a reconnaissance mission, to go into Eretz Yisrael and to see the lay of the land and identify various weak points, deficiencies in the defense of the land, and thus plan a strategy how to infiltrate, how to attack, and indeed how to conquer the land. Initially, Moshe Rabbeinu is not necessarily enthusiastic about this mission. Of course, he believes, just like until this point, everything that the Jewish people needed was provided to them by Hashem. But he is also hesitant to deny this request. As Rashi tells us later in the Parsha of Devarim, by way of analogy, if someone comes to you and wants to buy something from you, let's say they want to buy, in those days it was a donkey, someone wants to buy a car, and you're the salesman. So the person says, well, what do you think about this car? And you're willing to offer them to drive it, because you say, take the car, drive it around, it works great, it's amazing. Now, if you deny that request, that person is going to feel that something is wrong. There must be something about this car that is not right, and you are afraid that through this test drive, some of these deficiencies will be exploited, will be exposed. So you say, yeah, sure, take it for a ride, and you think that just by that display, that gesture of confidence, that will already instill a certain feeling within that person that this product is a good product. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to do. But he said, yeah, sure, you could go, you could scout, you could go on this reconnaissance mission, not a problem. But of course, once the Bnei Yisrael said, okay, and they took him up on his offer, he could not backtrack, because then that would raise all kinds of red flags. Why don't you want us to go to check out Eretz Yisrael? So in the end, Moshe Rabbeinu says, okay, and he consults with Hashem. Shlach lecha, Hashem says, you could send these messengers. You can send these agents to Eretz Yisrael. And that's what happens. They go on this mission. It takes 40 days, and they scout out the land. And they were told by Moshe Rabbeinu what they should be looking for. They should see what kind of people there are in terms of their strength, the fortifications, the defense systems of Eretz Yisrael, and the produce, the products of the land. But when they come back, they give this report. And in the aftermath of the report of Eretz Yisrael, there is all kinds of pandemonium, confusion, and to the extent that they all start crying, and they say, this is horrible, we're going to go in, we can't conquer this place, it's too difficult, they are too strong. And they're crying, and our tradition tells us they came back on the eve of Tisha B'Av, and they were crying that night in hopelessness and despair. And Hashem said, you're crying now, and that's in vain, but you will cry for generations on this night. And indeed, the day of Tisha B'Av in Jewish history became a day associated with tragedy, catastrophe, and tears. And the question many commentators raise on this story is, what exactly did these spies, these Meraglim, what did they do wrong? Seemingly, they were tasked with a mission to go and see Eretz Yisrael, its strengths, its weaknesses, and report back. And indeed, that's what they did. They came back and they said everything that they saw, they reported in detail. So why were they punished? They were punished, as we know, the Torah tells us that they were sentenced to death the entire generation of the Jewish people who were living in the desert at that time were banned from entering Eretz Yisrael. It was only the next generation that would be permitted to enter Eretz Yisrael. The question is, why? Is it because they came back with a report that was so intimidating, that was so debilitating? Seemingly, they came back and reported what they saw. So what were they supposed to do? Were they supposed to lie? If they saw giants and they saw fortified cities, were they supposed to come back and try to downplay it and say, it's going to be a piece of cake. Don't worry. We will be able to enter Eretz Yisrael. We will be able to conquer it because they are weak and they are small, and we will just run them over. Were they supposed to lie? They were tasked with a mission to come back with intelligence as to the nature of things. The Ramban, Nachmanides, he says that in fact, we find later in the Parsha of Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he recounts the story and he talks about the lay of the land and the nature of the people defending it, he in fact dramatizes and seems to portray the enemies in a much more harsh and more severe than the Meraglim themselves. They said that the cities were fortified and they are strong, and Moshe Rabbeinu added that they are fortified all the way to the heavens. Moshe Rabbeinu seems to have embellished, so to speak. He seems to have heightened the magnitude and the strength of the enemies, the people who are living in the land. So if so, the question is, what did the Meraglim, what did these spies do wrong? They seemed to have been sent with a very specific mission. If you're a scout, if you're told, come back I want a report as to what you see, you shouldn't be lying. You should be saying exactly what you saw. And seemingly, whatever they said was not a lie. Indeed, they were very powerful, mighty, and fortified. And therefore, why did the spies deserve such a punishment? Why did the entire generation deserve this punishment? So you might say, maybe these spies were supposed to have anticipated that, okay, maybe the land was fortified, but Hashem is all-powerful, omnipotent God. He is able to perform all kinds of miracles. Just like when the Bnei Yisrael, when the Jewish people entered, and eventually they entered into the land with the leadership and guidance of Yehoshua, so they entered in the most miraculous way, how they're able to breach the walls of Yericho. They miraculously sunk into the ground, and it was not a physical, natural military campaign, their entry, their infiltration into Eretz Yisrael. Perhaps they were supposed to anticipate miracles from Hashem, but that was not their mission. Their mission was to see how, indeed, they can enter Eretz Yisrael through natural military strategy. If they were there to see how exactly God could perform miracles, there was no need for their mission in the first place. Till that point, they left Mitzrayim, they left Egypt in a miraculous way. Hashem split the sea. He performed all these miraculous feats for them. So certainly, he could have taken them into Eretz Yisrael. But then there would be no purpose, there would be no place for their mission to scout and to reconnoiter and to see exactly how they can enter through a military campaign. That is something that you need physical, natural strategies, how to enter Eretz Yisrael. So miracles were not part of the scheme. So therefore, we can't say that they should have anticipated Hashem's miracles. Now, there's many explanations that are given to this question. Some say that the fallacy and the place where the Meraglim went wrong was because they were sent to give intelligence. They were supposed to go and see the everything about the land and report everything that they saw. The problem was that in addition to giving over the report, they gave a conclusion. They said, they are too powerful, they are too mighty, they're too strong, we are not able to go up and enter into the land. So there, they went wrong because they were there to give a report, not to give any conclusions, not to assess as to whether they can or cannot. Their mission was just to report. And that's where they went wrong. So that's an explanation. But number one, if you read the narrative of the story, even before they actually, when they start reporting and speaking about the land and the people who are there, even before they say, Lo nucha lalot, we cannot go up, already then, the Torah says, Vayahas Kalev. Kalev begins to attempt to quiet them and to silence them. Already, even before they came with the conclusion that we cannot enter the land, already Yoshua and Kalev sensed there was something awry, there was something off about the report of the spies. So it is an answer, but it doesn't seem to answer the entire question, because why was Kalev silencing them even before they said that conclusion? It seems that the report itself was lacking. And further, the mission of the spies indeed was to see the capability. They were there to assess, can we enter the land or not? That was really what their mission was all about. Yes, they shouldn't be demoralizing and giving a sense of despair and destabilizing the enthusiasm that the Jewish people had at the time. But at the end of the day, if they were sent to provide intelligence on the weaknesses and the strengths, ultimately the purpose of that is to see, can they enter the land? And if their intelligence points to their inability to do so, how it's not feasible and it's not practical, so therefore, for them saying that we can enter was actually seemingly part of their mission itself. So we will present today two perspectives on this question, which are really, there are many answers. So on a basic level, the problem with the report of the spies, the truth is, there was the report itself, everything was true. They did not say any falsehoods. They reported, indeed, the people were strong, they were tall, they were mighty, the barriers, the fortresses seemed to be impregnable, seemed to be unassailable, something that they would not be able to infiltrate, they would not be able to succeed in their military campaign. So what did they do wrong? Where the spies went wrong was that the way they said it. It is the way that they conveyed that report that was done in a not helpful and ultimately in a sinful way. What do we mean by that? They tell the story of a disciple of the Maggid of Mizrich, whose name was Rabbi Yaakov Shimshon of Spitovka. He ultimately made Aliyah. He went up to Eretz Yisrael and settled in Tveria. But prior to his move, something similar to what the Meraglim did, he went to Eretz Yisrael for a little while to check out the land and see where he would settle. He was there for several weeks. And ultimately, he came back to his town in the Ukraine, and to prepare to go back to Eretz Yisrael. On his way back, he was several miles away from his home. He stopped off at an inn, and he stayed there for several days. After resting there for a few days, he continued his journey home, which was only a few miles away. And some of his colleagues and disciples, they asked him, "We don't understand. You made this trek all the way from Eretz Yisrael, and you were basically home. You were a mere few minutes away, even if it was not by car, by horse and buggy, but still, you were almost home. Why did you stop off at this inn, stay there for a few days, and then come home? Why didn't you just go straight home?" So he said, "Let me explain. When I came back from Eretz Yisrael, I was exhausted from the journey. Being in Eretz Yisrael for a few weeks, traveling, not eating, not resting properly, I was totally exhausted. So if I would come home, straight from my trip from Eretz Yisrael directly home, people would look at me and they would see I'm totally fatigued and exhausted and famished. They would say Eretz Yisrael is a place that It's not a great place. It's a place where people are hungry, they're tired, they are suffocated over there. So I came to this inn to rest up for a few days. And now, when I come home, I'm all fresh and I'm invigorated. When they see me, they say, oh, Eretz Yisrael is a place, wow. The people come back with more energy, with more stamina. They seem to be invigorated by the experience. This is one of the deficiencies in the report of the Meraglim. You want to come back from Eretz Yisrael and you want to give a report? Give a report. But a lot of times, it's the way you do it. It's the manner how you say it. That's what's all important. In the beginning of the Parsha, Rashi makes an interesting observation. The Parsha of the Meraglim is juxtaposed to the story immediately before this Parsha, and the end of Baalotcha, which talks about the story of Miriam. As we mentioned last week, Miriam, when she hears from her sister-in-law, Tzipporah, that she is no longer, it was a slip of the tongue, but Tzipporah informs Miriam that she's no longer together with Moshe because he is now a prophet and he has to live in a state of purity, in a state he has to be focused in life. And she immediately, when she hears this news, she runs to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, and she creates this whole story, this whole sensation that Moshe Rabbeinu and Tzipporah are not together, and she starts questioning it. And Rashi says that in the aftermath of the story, which Tzipporah was stricken with tsaras, with the spiritual leprosy, the spies should have taken note. And that's why these two stories are juxtaposed one to the other, because the spies also spoke Lashon Hara. They slandered Eretz Yisrael. And that's why these two stories are together. And seemingly, the comparison seems to be unfair. The spies are associated with one of the most egregious sins in Jewish history. They are condemned not to enter Eretz Yisrael. What they spoke about seems to be libelous, slanderous about Eretz Yisrael. Miriam, it was a simple story with a family. She was speaking about family politics. How could we compare the two? How the spies should have taken a lesson from Miriam. How can we even equate one to the other? And the Rebbe explains, one of the ideas here is that, in fact, this gives us insight. The story of Miriam actually gives us insight into the sin of the spies. Just like by Miriam, what she said was 100% true. And in fact, maybe she could confront Moshe Rabbeinu and ask him, what's going on in your family life, whether it was her business or not. But if you do speak about a very sensitive issue, it should not be done in a public forum. When you criticize a friend or a family member, you don't do it in front of everyone. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. If it's something so sensitive and something so delicate, you speak privately, you get to the point. Don't make a whole issue out of it. Stop elaborating on it, because ultimately, the way we say something is almost as important as what we are saying. And the same thing too is with the spies. With the spies, they came back and spoke about Eretz Yisrael. You want to say that there are some issues with it? Why gather all the people and start instilling a sense of fear and trepidation and paralysis and how mighty and strong and powerful, and start making everyone feel weak at the knees? You want to speak about Eretz Yisrael? It's such a beautiful place. You have some issues, go to Moshe Rabbeinu and say, there might be an issue, how we're going to be able to enter. There are some challenges, but why make a whole big story out of it? And there's that, and the way it is compared to the sin of Miriam is where the sin of the spy lies. There's the famous story of the previous Chabad, of the fifth Chabad Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber, the Rashab, who was playing with his older brother. They were little children, Reb Zalman Aaron, the Razah. And as children of their father, who was also a Rebbe, the Rebbe Marash, Reb Shmuel, they decided to play. What do children of a Rebbe do? They play the game Rebbe and Chassid, Chassid and the Rebbe. So for the Rebbe Rashab, he didn't want to play the role of the Rebbe, so his older brother, the Razah, decided to play that role. And They were having a yechidus. They have that audience as a chassid goes to the Rebbe and talks about some of the issues that are on their mind and some of the challenges they're facing in life, seeking guidance. So the Rebbe Rashab, he was playing the part of a chassid, and he says, Rebbe, I need a tikkun. I need some kind of path in life to rectify and to mend some of my failings. He says, tell me, what have you done wrong? He said, I've been playing with nuts. I was eating nuts on Shabbos, and that was something that I shouldn't have been doing, and I asked for forgiveness. And right away, the Razah responds. He says, well, you should do this, you should do that. As a Rebbe, they give different advice how to heal in their avodas Hashem. And right away, the Rebbe Rashab observes. He says, I could tell you're not really a Rebbe. You're not a Rebbe. He says, how do you know? He says, well, I notice a Rebbe, when a chassid has a problem and they ask them something, when the Rebbe would respond, he first would give a sigh. In Yiddish, they call it a krechts, and then he would respond. When I told you my problem, you didn't right away feel instinctively a sigh, a krechts, that it bothered you. You answered very casually, nonchalantly. It didn't really bother you. What the Rebbe Rashab was saying is that in life, a very important key component is not just what you say, it's how you say it. When you see something wrong and you want to communicate that to somebody else, you have to be very, very sensitive. You have to be very, very discreet. So this is one perspective on the sin of the Meraglim. We'll present another perspective. And before we do this, we have to introduce another part of the narrative in the story in this week's Parsha. As we mentioned, in the aftermath of the story, Hashem condemned and banned the Meraglim from entering Eretz Yisrael. And initially he tells Moshe Rabbeinu that because of this sin, he will strike a plague. He will annihilate all of the Jewish people because they no longer believe in me. And they said, why should we go into the land of Israel to be slaughtered? Let's go back to Mitzrayim. Let's go back to Egypt. And Hashem says, you know what? I'm done with these people. I'm going to kill all of them. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells Hashem, he says something very interesting. He says, well, if you do that, you know what's going to happen? All of the nations of the world are going to say, Mitzrayim and all those are going to say, well, you were able to take your people out of Israel, but you were not powerful, you were not mighty enough to bring them into Eretz Yisrael. And they're going to say that's why Hashem took them out to the desert. He slaughtered them because he was not powerful enough to prevail over the enemies in Israel. And Hashem says, you know what? I will not annihilate them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave them here in the desert. And over 40 years, they will all pass on. And there's only the next generation, they will merit to enter the land of Eretz Yisrael. This is a very, very bizarre exchange between Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu. As we know, Hashem, he is all forgiving. He is very compassionate and kind. Hashem, after the Moshe Rabbeinu is advocating for the Bnei Yisrael, he says, I want to kill all of them. And Moshe Rabbeinu advocates for them. Hashem does not completely forgive the Bnei Yisrael. He says, I want to kill them. He doesn't kill them right away, but only over 40 years. And he does not forgive them to the extent that they could go into Eretz Yisrael. As we know in the Parsha, the Jewish people right away regretted this whole episode. And they said, Moshe, we want to go into the land. We really, really want to go. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, sorry, that window has closed. The opportunity has passed. There were the Mapilim, the people who were defiant, and they wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael, and they met a very tragic end. So here it seems that despite Moshe Rabbeinu praying for them, it was not enough. Hashem did not completely forgive them. He did not allow them to go into Eretz Yisrael, and they died out over the 40-year period. So the question is, number one, why didn't Hashem forgive them? What was different about this sin than previous times? It was even the Chet HaEgel, where that seemingly was a much more severe, much more egregious violation The very relationship, the very contract, the very covenant of the Bnei Yisrael with Hashem was violated with the Chet HaEgel. And Hashem seems to be more forgiving there than he is here. And equally puzzling is Moshe Rabbeinu's defense, his advocacy. He tells Hashem, well, what are you going to gain by killing them? Now, your PR, the image that you're going to have in the eyes of the nations of the world will be diminished. Moshe Rabbeinu seemingly should make a much better argument. Just like he does by the Chet HaEgel, by the sin of the golden calf, he says, why are you killing them? They are your children. He should have defended them. He should have don't say, well, if you kill them, it's not going to look good. Maybe you could find some mitigating circumstance. Maybe say they were just slaves. They're confused. They were just let out of Egypt a short while ago. Be understanding of them. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't in any way resort to these kind of he doesn't resort to any of these arguments. Rather, he says, what are the nations of the world going to say? One of the answers the Rebbe explains to this puzzling exchange is that when Hashem does something, it is not. We often think about Hashem's relationship with the Jewish people. There's reward, there's punishment. If you do something good, he rewards you. If you do something against his will, if you sin, he punishes you. Hashem is not vindictive, vengeful, petty. Hashem is all-merciful. He's kind and benevolent. And just like a parent should not be punishing their child because they want to get back at them. Rather, we have to look at this whole thing very, very differently. With Hashem, there is one reality. There's truth. And that is, therefore, if we do something good, we align ourselves with something positive. If we do something wrong, what happens is we don't just get punished. We don't just get a slap on the cheek, on the wrist. What we get is a consequence. By Hashem, there's only cause and effect. When you do something wrong, it's like you put your hand in a fire, right? It's not you put your hand in the fire, therefore the punishment is your hand gets burnt. That's not what happens. What happens is there's laws of nature. If you put your hand in the fire, you automatically get burnt. So what happened over here is the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people is not natural. It's something that transcends the laws of physics and of nature and of science. Indeed, the Jewish people, to enter into Eretz Yisrael through the natural means, it really was not possible. It was not feasible. It wasn't something that was within the realm of possibility. There were these 31 kings, powerful, mighty, big fortresses. Logically, it's hard to understand how the Jewish people could enter. But they could enter if they had faith, if they believed in Hashem. Just like they got to this point, all of the miracles that they experience, the exodus from Mitzrayim, the splitting of the sea, they received the Torah. There was the man, there was the well of Miriam, there was the clouds of glory, their defeat of Amalek. All of these amazing stories happened because the Jewish people were connected to Hashem, and therefore anything is possible. What Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu is, it's not an issue of whether I forgive the Jewish people or not. The issue here is that despite all I have done, they do not have that connection. They have not internalized this idea that their relationship with me is supernatural. It transcends the boundaries of nature. And therefore, the realization here is, it's not that I'm not going to allow them to enter Eretz Yisrael. The reality is, if you think you can't do it, you're right, you cannot do it, because on your own, you are not strong enough. You are not powerful enough to enter Eretz Yisrael. It's only because you're connected to Hashem, you have the faith. That is how you're able to enter. So Hashem says there's nothing that I could really do. There's a lack of faith, and therefore they need to stay here. And perhaps it's actually better if I let them die out now than go up into Eretz Yisrael and fight, and it will end in a tragic, brutal way. because naturally that will be the conclusion. Moshe Rabbeinu responds to this. He says, Hashem, I hear what you're saying, but if the concern here is the lack of faith that the Bnei Yisrael have in you, imagine if you kill them all right now. That will lead to even a greater lack of faith in you. Because now all the nations of the world will see, why is Hashem killing them out all in the desert? The only logical conclusion is because they can't enter Eretz Yisrael. So if the concern here is the diminishment, the lack of faith in Hashem, their annihilation will contribute to a greater lack of faith in Hashem. What we have from here is a very, very powerful idea. The idea here is that the Meraglim, their failing here is the lack of faith in themselves and in their ability to do things that Hashem told them to do. If you know that you are sent by Hashem on a mission, Shlach lecha, Hashem said that these are going to be my agents, my shluchim, my emissaries. If you are an agent of Hashem, then anything is possible. There is nothing in life that can be more powerful, stronger than Hashem, because He is all of reality. And therefore, the moment that you say, we cannot do it, you're making a very, very powerful statement. When we look in the story, we see something fascinating. The Meraglim tell Moshe Rabbeinu that when we were in the land of Israel, there were these giants all around us. And they say something like this. They say that we looked like ourselves, in our eyes, like we were grasshoppers. We appeared like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And also, we appeared like grasshoppers, and that is how we appeared in their eyes. In other words, what they were saying was, we perceived ourselves as grasshoppers, and that's how they perceived us. So it's strange, because I can understand how they saw themselves as being like a grasshopper. How did they know what those people thought of them? How did they know that these giants perceived them to be small like a grasshopper? The answer is because when you think you're small, if you think you're weak, if you think that you're not capable of something, so then what happens is other people perceive you in the same way. They will see you as weak. They will see you as small and helpless. And then that is the self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what happens. Because you think you can't do it, and indeed you cannot. They tell the story of this fellow who was working on a new company, and he needed a lot of capital, a lot of investment to make it happen. And after much effort, all of his friends, family, the people that he knew said, it's a great idea, but, I'm sorry, I can't invest in this. This is not for me. And after much effort, he felt there was nothing left he could do. He wasn't able to raise the money. So one day he leaves the office all dejected and down, and he sits down on a bench. And all of a sudden, he was sitting in this park near one of these long-term care homes. And people from that home would walk out. This was obviously before the pandemic, so these people were coming out. And this elderly fellow sits down next to him on the bench. And he says to him, tell me, you look down. What's bothering you today? He says, well, I have this business venture, and I tried very hard to drum up the funds. The angel investors are not biting. It's been a total failure, and I don't think that I could do it. I need the money. So this fellow tells him, I'm looking at you. You seem to be like the kind of person that could be very successful. I believe in you. I think you could do it. So what I'm going to do is, he pulls out his checkbook and he writes him a check for $1 million. And he says, who are you? He says, well, my name is Henry Ford. And here is this check. What I want you to do is, I want you to take this check and put it in your drawer, in your office, and hold on to it. Don't use it right away. And And what you should do is try and go about, pull all your strings, do what you can to try to make this thing happen. And if you really, really need to tap into this money, only as a last resort. But remember, this money is here for you, and good luck. So when this person got this check, he was amazed, and this was a whole new energy. He totally was resurrected. He takes this check and he puts it into his drawer in his office with renewed vigor, with renewed passion. He picks up the phone and starts calling people, and he starts speaking to people and pitching and prospecting. And within a short time, everything started to work. People started to buy into his business venture. And within a short time, he was able to collect all the funds, and he got his business off the ground. After a while, he started to become very successful, and he remembered it was that initial guy who wrote him this check, and he decided he wanted to go back and to thank him. So he goes back to the park, and he sees that old age home nearby, and he goes inside, and he's looking around. He can't see this person, so he goes to the front desk, and he says, "Tell me, I'm looking for a friend that I met here a little while ago, and I wanted to thank him for something." "Well, who is this person?" He's trying to describe. He says, "Maybe you know his name." "Well, his name is Henry Ford." They said, "No, can't be." And they're describing. They said, "Oh, that guy. Let me explain to you who this guy was. This guy was older, suffering some cognitive challenges. He was having hallucinations. And every day he would go around. His name was something different. One day it was Henry Ford. Another time it's Abraham Lincoln. Sometimes it's Donald Trump. Each person, he is a different person. He takes on a new character. But one of the truisms of this story is that ultimately, what changes the person? It's because they know that in their desk, there is a check for $1 million. And therefore, they believe in themselves. They know they could actually do it. And once you start to believe in yourself, everything else changes. So what Hashem wants us to know, and the sin of the spies was they did not believe. They did not believe that they were ambassadors of Hashem. And when you're connected to Hashem, anything is possible. Can you say that Hashem would either underestimate our capabilities or overestimate our capabilities? The Torah tells us that in every situation we find ourselves, we are there because Hashem believes that we can contend with that challenge. Otherwise, we wouldn't find ourselves in that predicament. And therefore, the spies, everything that they said was because there was a lack of faith. They didn't realize that if Hashem is sending you on this mission, anything is possible. And therefore, if you find yourselves in a place where something's not going right, if something, you're hitting walls, you're frustrated, you have to remember something. You know, there's a chassid, Shliach of the Rebbe. His name is Rabbi Shlomo Kunyan, the head Chabad Shliach in California. And he's known for going through lots of, somebody who always goes on the edge in terms of the finances. And one time he was in a financial predicament where one of his big institutions were going to be taken away from him by his creditors. And here he is, he's in court, he realizes the matzav, the situation is very, very challenging. There's these very fancy, important lawyers, power hitters, and he realizes that things are not looking well. He sends off a telegram to the Rebbe asking for a bracha. And as the proceedings go on, there's a intermission, there's a break. He runs out to the payphone to call up the Rebbe's secretariat, Rabbi Chadakav, to ask, has there been an update? Has there been a response from the Rebbe? And he tells the Rabbi Kunyan that the Rebbe said that you should not worry. Everything will be well, and he should be besimcha ubetuv levav. He should be with joy, happiness, and gladness of the heart. As soon as Rabbi Kunyan hears this response, he is so overwhelmed with joy and excitement, he begins to start dancing and jumping in the phone booth, in the payphone booth in the courthouse. He's so full of excitement. He's jumping and singing and he's very, very loud. He makes a lot of noise. And the other lawyers from the opposition happen to be walking by, and they notice that their defendant is here in this booth, and he's jumping and he's singing and he's clapping and he's dancing and hollering. And they're thinking to themselves, what's going on over here? So there's two possibilities. One possibility, how can we interpret this? The guy's meshuggah. He's obviously he's having a nervous breakdown. He's in debt. He's in a bad situation, and that's why he completely lost it. But then they thought that's not likely. There's a much more likely explanation of what's happening here. He obviously just got some tip. He got some intelligence report, a bombshell, that's going to guarantee him his victory. His case is a slam dunk. He's so excited. That's why he's dancing. There's no other explanation. So they decided they need to settle this out of court. So they walk over to him and they say, Rabbi, would you be willing to accept an offer of 50 cents on the dollar? So Rabbi Kunyan listens to them and says, what? I will take 25 cents on the dollar, or forget about it. Have a nice day. And when they saw that confidence, they agreed and they settled right away. 25 cents on the dollar. For this chassid, when the Rebbe told him that everything will be well, you should be with simcha, it wasn't a doubt. It wasn't what's going to be, how is that going to work? Seemingly, this case is insurmountable. The challenge is too great. That's not what went through his mind. As soon as the Rebbe said it will be good, that became the reality. And therefore, he was overjoyed. And once you connect to that reality, if you live in that space, that becomes indeed the reality. So what Hashem is telling the Meraglim, what he's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, the problem here is, it's not about forgiveness. It's not about, I will say, okay, I forgive you, go into Eretz Yisrael. If you are not linked up, if you are not dialed in to this space where we are supposed to be, there's nothing more that can be done. It needs to be a different generation. It is the next generation who perhaps they didn't have the slavery, they didn't have the challenges that their parents had. They will grow up differently. Perhaps they will be able to enter Eretz Yisrael. There was a chassid who came to the Rebbe, and he complained. He said, Rebbe, I have a lot on my plate. I have family to take care of. I have a lot of communal expectations in terms of my career, and it's very, very hard to juggle all that. How am I supposed to contend with this? And the Rebbe told him something very powerful. He says, the most important thing to remember is that you are capable of doing all that you need to do. Whether it's your family challenges, whether it's your communal engagements, responsibilities, expectations. Once you believe that you can do it, that is the most important thing. That itself will give you the power, the capacity to meet that challenge. So, in summation, what we have from the story of the Meraglim, amongst the many, many lessons, number one, even if the report was accurate, it was truthful, they should have been sensitive. When you convey something sensitive to another person, we should be in tune with who we're saying it to, how we're saying it, and it should be done in a very, very delicate way. But finally, the most enduring message, perhaps, of the Meraglim is that no matter where we are in life, whether it's a family challenge, a career, economical, health, in every situation where we may find ourselves, we have to believe that we are there for a purpose, we're there for a very important reason. But the most important of all, if we are there, that means we can deal with it. And if we believe in ourselves, if we believe in our power and our ability, then it will ultimately become true. Because when we think ourselves as small and weak, indeed we are small and weak. But if we think that we are powerful, we are capable, then any challenge that we may encounter in life, we will able to overcome and prevail. So may it be Hashem's will, each and every one of us, we should not have any challenges, we should have no struggles. But when we do confront something that may seem to be like a land of Eretz Yisrael, that there's tall, strong fortresses that seem impregnable, impermeable, if you feel that there's something in life that you cannot accomplish, you need to know each and every one of us are the Shluchim of Hashem. We are agents of Hashem. He gives us a land in Eretz Yisrael that we need to conquer, that we need to enter. And He gives each and every one of us the ability to choose. Will we be like the spies and look at the land and say, find 100 reasons why we can't do it, why it cannot be done? Or will we take this opportunity to see that mission, that space that we have in life as our ultimate calling? And every challenge and every setback is really an invitation for growth, for mobility, to be able to realize our truest potential. You should all have a great week, a Shavua Tov, and hope to see you soon.